Welcome to Seller's Journey, the podcast where we speak to great sales reps and leaders and share their real stories from start to sales success.
Hello, everybody. I'm Joseph Fung, and today we're fortunate enough to be chatting with Mahmoud Hmouz, the head of sales at Growth Genius. Mahmoud, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Joseph.
I love these conversations because we get to unbox all the fun stories with zigzags, and I particularly love yours because of the journey from your academic background into sales. So thanks again. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
So I know we've had the chance to get to know each other over time in the tech scene and in conferences, but maybe you can help our audience. Where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to school? Let's start there.
Sure. So, the first part of my life, I actually grew up in Poland. And I left Poland when I was about 7, going on 8. Then from 8 till 18, I was in Jordan, the Middle East. And that's where, you can say that I grew up and I was a teenager and lived the most of my life.
But then you came to Canada for university, right?
Correct. So I went to Ottawa, University of Ottawa. I didn't know how cold it's going to be, but I found out soon enough. But it was fun.
That's quite the shocking surprise at times. I'm glad we're getting out of the winter months now.
Yeah, of course.
So you didn't start with sales. You did a double major. Am I right in biochem and chemical engineering?
Correct.
And what was the focus? What were you hoping to accomplish with that? Because that's definitely a different direction than sales.
Yeah. So here's the thing. I grew up, my dad is a medical doctor. My mom is a pharmacist. I had my life laid out for me. I was either going to be a doctor or an engineer, right? I come from a culture in the Middle East where you have to be a doctor, engineer, or pharmacist for people to kind of look up to you. Mm-hmm. Even during my high school, all I did was math, biology, chemistry, physics. So I didn't have much of an option. I was either going to be, an engineer or a doctor. I decided to be an engineer. At university, I really enjoyed science. So I found this program that would allow me to do both, be an engineer and scientist. Wow. I was a big fan of chemistry, so I decided to do Chem-Eng. And then Biochem was also something that I was passionate about during my grade 12 biology. So it worked nicely. It took me about 5 years and a half to finish, but it was good.
Nice. So getting out of school, though, same thing. You didn't start in sales. I understood you had some research engineering roles. Could you share a bit more about that?
Correct. So I did my undergrad thesis in a Chem-Eng lab. I enjoyed it. So I worked as a research assistant for a bit. And it's interesting, you think that when growing back, you think that engineering and like working in lab, you're going to be this mad scientist running crazy experiments. When you get to the lab, it's a lot more boring than that. So you could spend the whole week just designing an experiment and working on it slowly, and it's definitely not as exciting as movies make it to be.
So what was the trigger, the catalyst, if I can use a chemistry term, to get you to know that you wanted a different direction?
Yeah, so after being a research assistant, I worked as a process engineer in a factory in BC, actually. And that was okay. We started off small, and we were just 3 chemical engineers that set up a manufacturing facility, and we ran it basically day and night. So I loved small. So I knew that for a fact. Like I loved working in a small team. Then I moved back home and I worked in pharmaceuticals as a project manager for about 3 years. Worked in a big company, 6,000 people. And it was fun, because that was my first professional job where I had to, wear business attire and, be careful of politics and all that kind of stuff. But this whole time I was, checking on business news and startup news and kind of, seeing how companies go from ideation to creation to then scale up. So after 3 years, I decided it's time to switch gears and get into business. And that's when I basically traveled to Sweden to do my master's in business.
Got it. So just to recap the journey so far, we've got Poland, Jordan, cold part of Canada university, West Coast, warmer part of Canada for one role, back to Jordan for another role, now to Sweden for your master's. Do I have this right?
Correct.
Okay. So you're in Sweden, you're doing your master's. What were you studying? You
I
said
was actually
entrepreneurship, any specific focus?
correct. It was basically managing new venture creation. So it was actually a really cool program where in 10 months you had to start with an idea and then actually make a company out of it, register the company, and come up with a business plan. So, they took us from ideation to idea evaluation, and then to actually, making sure that you scale up your company and you have sales and marketing and all that stuff. So it was a very good program. 10 months. I didn't want to go back to school for another 2 years, so it was a perfect timing as well.
You said that you had to start your own company. What did you start?
Yeah, so me and a buddy of mine, we actually started a soap company. So we were the soap guys, and we actually manufactured soap.
Great.
Yeah, we manufactured soap out of waste falafel oil.
Whoa.
Yeah, and then the waste glycerin from biodiesel.
That's so fascinating.
Yeah,
So it's the kind of waste product from two different industries into soap. I love it. Now, you mentioned, though, that it was while in Sweden you got your first real sales role. Is that right?
correct.
And what was that journey like? I mean, that first sales role is always so tough. What was that search like? How'd you find it? How'd you get started?
Yeah, that was super tough. And so now, anyone that wants to break into sales and messages me on LinkedIn or emails me, I'm always open to have a conversation with them to give them tips, just because I would have loved someone to tell me, how to do it. Um, Coming out of university, I knew I wanted to be in a startup, and in startup, you're either on the product side or the customer side or sales. So I was naturally good at talking to customers during our startup creation, so I decided to stick to sales. It wasn't easy. I had to, the process was applying online, but also doing what you do in sales, so following up with my prospects. So you have to treat it as, you're selling yourself basically. So what I did is I came up with a list of companies that I wanted to work for, started, seeing if they have any posts online. If not, then I would reach out to them, and ask for either a virtual chat, a coffee, or any tips on how to get in that industry. By the end of it, it worked because the person that hired me said that he was impressed with me following up with them after applying, and he thought that that's what a successful salesperson should do. And he gave me the opportunity to be in sales, and I'm going to be forever grateful to that person.
So you've had a whole series of successes in your sales career since, I mean, now to the being the head of sales at Growth Genius. In that journey, what surprised you most about sales?
Yeah, so it's funny. Whenever I tell my dad I'm in sales, he thinks I'm like a car salesman, or one of those guys that like sells you pens or something like that. I think what surprised me the most is how you have to be super smart if you're going to be successful in sales, because it combines different aspects. You have to be really good with numbers. You have to know your numbers inside out. So you have to be good at math. You have to be really good at relationships, because let's be honest, people buy from people they like. But you also have to be empathetic, and you have to be smart enough to position yourself as a service that your customer basically cannot live without. And you have to combine all these to be successful sales, and it's not easy, right? You have a lot of moving pieces that have to come together for you to make a sale. And again, it's definitely not as easy as people think it is.
Now, it's exceptionally challenging, and it does take a lot of intelligence, systems thinking. And you joked a bit about it earlier. When you say to your parents that you're in sales, their reaction. But I do hear that from many people. There's that family pressure or the assumption of taking your career in one direction, and people are often surprised when you're getting into sales. How do you talk about that now with family? And have they changed their opinions at all?
So I mean, my dad still asks me the questions like, are you ever going to go back to engineering? It's like, why did you go to school for 6 years if you're going to be in sales? So I try to explain to them that being in sales is not, it's not just basically calling up people every day and asking them for their money. It's not. I think for the older generation that has never been in SaaS sales or solution selling, it's a bit hard to get them to understand what exactly you do. But they've seen that, I've had successes and I went from being, in the E to being head of sales, and I'm happy what I do and they support me 100%.
That's incredible. I love it. Now, thinking a little bit about that journey, as we've kind of talked through that process, if you were going to speak to yourself of, 10 years ago, kind of finishing up your schooling, looking to choose your next steps, what advice would you give yourself from 10 years ago?
The advice I would give myself would be, so I think it's important for you to take time off after school to realize what you want to be. I think that for me personally, I think that our education system is a bit broken because you have to decide what you want to be for the rest of your life when you're 18. Correct? Like that's not even legal. It's not even legal to drink in Ontario when you're 18, yet you have the power to decide what you want to be for the rest of your life. So I would say, take some time off, maybe work for a year, explore different industries, talk to different professionals, and see what you want to be. It's a very important decision, and I think that if you start early in whichever career you want to be for the rest of your life is going to be a lot easier. I got into sales when I was 30 years old, right? Like if I knew that this world existed, I could have gotten it when I was 22, and I would have had an 8-year head start.
There you go.
I don't regret it, obviously, because I think that my engineering background helped me. But again, I had no idea that sales could be so much fun when I was 18.
That's such a great piece of advice, and that dovetails well. We were just actually interviewing another gentleman who spoke a lot about during his university time, his college time, tasting different careers or different opportunities. And I like the way you characterized it as taking the time off between school and work to kind of make up your mind and figure out where you want to go. I think that's great advice.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, some programs have a co-op program right now. Some universities have a program co-op right now, and I think that's very good because at least you get a taste of the real world and you see what your life could be like after university. So, if you could, definitely get yourself in one of those programs as well.
So this is fantastic advice, and I love the trajectory and the journey you've already had, but I'd love to hear where are you heading. So that was the advice you might give yourself from 10 years ago. But if you were speaking to future you, what do you hope to congratulate him for?
So the first thing that comes to mind is, first and foremost, I think that, before being in sales, I'm a father and I have a 4-year-old kid. I have another one on the way. So in 10 years, I definitely want to be, a good father of two.
That's exciting. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. But in terms of career-wise, I definitely want to stay in sales. I enjoy sales. I think there's so much to learn in sales. I'm a sales student. I try to read every book I can. I try to listen to podcasts all the time. There's so much knowledge in sales. It's insane. And it's very interesting how the sales world has evolved from back in the days. There was this, information asymmetry between the buyer and the seller. Now that doesn't exist anymore. And, successful salespeople have to adapt to that, and it's super interesting to see how people do it, right? So there's different advices, be human and empathize with your customer, and make sure that you give them positive ROI. Regardless, what I'm trying to say is that I really enjoy selling and I enjoy learning about sales. So 10 years probably still in sales. Hopefully, have a VP title. If not, then probably lead a sales department, basically.
Love it. I love particularly your comment about learning and growing. Any particularly favorite podcasts or books top of mind right now?
Yeah, so I'm reading right now Sell the Way You Buy by David Premier. I just got it a couple of
Mm-hmm.
weeks ago. Definitely a really good book. David is also a good guy. I'm part of his sales group as well. I think he's doing a lot of interesting things in the sales world just because he comes from academic engineering background, just like myself. So he's always trying to justify sales using science. All his talks are good. His podcasts are good. His book is excellent. I also love Sales Gravy. Sales Gravy was the podcast that I listened to when I first started my job at Growth Genius and I needed some motivation. So every morning I would listen to Jeb Blunt speak about how to crush it in terms of prospecting and closing deals and going after your clients. So, if you need some motivation, definitely Sales Gravy.
I love both of those recommendations, and I have to take the opportunity for a selfish plug. If, as a listener, if you're listening in and this is your first episode, we did interview David back at episode 5, so you might want to check that one out. And I completely agree. His book is great. I am digging through it myself, and this is such a blast.
Yeah, we're lucky to have David in Toronto for sure.
We really are. Definitely ups the game locally. Mahmoud, I know I said I wouldn't take too much of your time. Can I go through a couple of rapid fire questions before we wrap up?
Of course.
Okay. So first one, tools and systems. What's your favorite sales tool?
So I am biased, and I'm going to say the Growth Genius platform.
There you go. You got to take the opportunity.
I'm in sales, though.
And what's your favorite movie?
Favorite movie is There Will Be Blood.
Nice. And when you were a kid, what did you want to grow up to be?
I wanted to be an astronaut.
That is fantastic. Me too. Me too. I'm glad to hear it.
I mean, my kid now, she's 4 and she wants to be an astronaut, so I think it's common.
I feel like there must be a pattern there. The wanting to be an astronaut, going into engineering, getting into sales. I can empathize with that journey.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much. This was such a great conversation. I appreciate the time.
Thank you, Joseph. This was my first podcast, and I really enjoyed it.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to our next conversation. You take care.
I'm here. You too.